Greetings. I'm your host Marco, and this is another episode of Kingdom Cast, the podcast that seeks to proclaim the extent of Christ's kingship on the day of his power while equipping the saints through biblical and applied theology. This is another podcast, as you can tell. I decided to keep this format, particularly in trying to do cultural engagement. There's a lot of things to be worked on. I don't particularly like it, mainly as you, the audience, might be able to tell. The camera is very low quality. I'm gonna save it for another time, maybe when I have more investment in doing the podcast, a better camera setup, just a better editing tool and equipment and whatnot. And as you might know, uh, this is particularly not my forte. I actually prefer teaching rather than doing cultural, political, and social commentary. But I do feel like uh, it's worth trying because I notice these kind of videos garner just that much more attention than the usual videos where I simply go through a biblical text and doctrine. Also, you might notice I am in a different place. I'm in my room back home in Indonesia, and yet I'm still going to be talking about Malaysian social climates. So I find that pretty funny. But yeah, the topic I want to tackle today, if you probably figured it out, if you read the title of the video, but I actually wanted to tackle topics of censorship and blasphemy law. Um, and these are pretty obscure topic. A lot of Christians don't really know how to engage in topics of what how does blasphemy law look like in the Old Testament? How should it look like today? Um, what about censorship? We have a lot of talks about censorship, conservatives, liberal, whatever spectrum you are. They talk about censorship to some degree. And I think the Good Vibes Festival that happened recently in Malaysia would provide good context as well as excuse to bring up the subject. Before anything, of course, you might ask, why should we talk about blasphemy law? Why should we talk about censorship and all these cultural engagement? And I think to give a good perspective, I have to tell you guys, I am post millennial, right? Which simply means that I believe Christ will come after he puts all his enemies under his feet. So every enemy, including sickness, disease, um, unfaithfulness, infidelity, unbelief, all those sorts of things, they're going to be destroyed before death, before the final resurrection of the righteous and the unrighteous. So that means every ungodly society and every ungodly forms of law will also be destroyed before Christ comes. And therefore, there is space, there is category for us to think about a future Christian society, a future Christian culture, a future Christian civilization where everything would be under the light of the gospel, the light of biblical law, and so on and so forth. And this also goes into my other uh, conviction, which is the fact that I'm a reconstructionist, which simply believes that we should reconstruct everything, include not just the church, not just family, but also the political sphere, the civil sphere, the cultural sphere. We have to reconstruct all those things under uh, God's law, under God's revelation as well. So, and now uh, Christian Reconstructionism usually gets strawman. People usually say, oh, they just want to legislate Mosaic law into the 20th century. But I'm actually here to tackle that now. So hopefully, I'm able to get rid of the strawman. We can actually talk about biblical principle, not just, oh, he wants to kill blasphemers or he wants to publicly exact the death penalty on blasphemy and have a Christian theocracy and whatnot, which I do think will happen. But again, my goal primarily here in this video is to elucidate biblical principles on how Christians should tackle things like censorship and topics of blasphemy, right? And hopefully, there's applications not just for politicians and lobbyists, but also for the Christians personally day to day. So the two common side to the discussion is usually pretty secular. There's usually very little mention of God's law. or even biblical wisdom for that matter. But commonly known, conservatives, those on the right spectrum, more traditional, whatever you want to call it, the conservatives usually want little to no censorship in journalism as well as language, right? They do not want their news to be dumbed down. They don't want their news to be written by a corporate entity or by a government entity and so on and so forth. They don't want a policing of language, right? It's all the talk these days about, oh, I can call he a he because he is a he, even though the person transgendered and wants to be called a girl, right? Those kind of word policing. They don't like the word policing. They don't like the word censorship. Oh, if I identify as a girl, you can't call me a he, even though I was born a he, and things like that. And usually conservatives are also pro censorship in terms of sexual things, right? There's a lot of controversy today on sexual education, sex ed on public schools in America, and that's kind of where the conversation is around these days. Now, another one is the liberals. The other side is the liberals, who usually want a lot of censoring in the language, right? They want to have safe spaces. They want to have these words that are not hurtful, right? They don't want to call people fat. They don't want to call people pedophiles. They don't want to call people gays or faggots or whatnot. You have to be gender affirming. You have to exhibit gender affirming language. You have to do a bunch of things. Essentially, police your language in such a way that you hurt nobody, which generally is impossible to do. You're gonna offend somebody, especially that nowadays people get offended by every single thing. And yet, the funny thing is, the liberals are usually the ones who want zero censorship, particularly in terms of sexuality, right? Whenever it's in art style, in art media, in movies and TV shows, and in your novels, and maybe even in public education, right? They want sexuality to not be censored. They want to teach sex education to kids. They want to teach, 5 to 8 year old what sexual confusion looks like. They want to show the kids what drag shows, drag queens look like, etc., etc. All that kind of nonsense. So, interestingly enough, right, both ideologies, conservative and liberal, they both believe in some kind of censorship. One wants to censor language, one doesn't. One wants to censor sexual obscene stuff, the other one doesn't. And so it's interesting. Uh, the question is only what is there to censor, right? Which one should not be censored and which one should be censored. So, the discussion can be pretty arcane if we stay here, so I think we should bring in the Good Vibes Festival for context. Recently, there was a Good Vibes Festival, which is a musical festival in Malaysia. It was actually held quite near to my university in Malaysia, in Sepang, the state over there. Forgive me if I get all these small details wrong. But yeah, it's around there in Sepang. It should be pretty close to my university. And it's important to note, just as a context for the political climate in Malaysia, according to Article 3 of the Malaysian Constitution, it states that Islam is the religion of the Federation, right? Islam is the religion of the Federation of Malaysia, although all other religions are freely exercised, something along that line. You can look it up. It's in Article 3. Um, but yeah, this kind of sets up the beginning of the controversy. Obviously, being an Islam state, an Islamic federation, Malaysia has laws against sodomy. There's a particular article on it, although the articulation can be a bit ambiguous. But yeah, there are laws against sodomy, and so naturally, this is what is considered to be homophobic by the left, right? They any laws that are against transgenderism, homosexuality, all those kind of stuff, these would be considered homophobic. We're just gonna use that term. I'm not gonna kind of define it, whatever. Oh, Malaysia is afraid of gay people. That's kind of not the point. We're just gonna stick to the terms that they kind of decided for themselves. But yeah, they consider this homophobic, whatever that might mean. Now, what happened is during the Good Vibes Festival, there was a ban. The ban was called 1975, the year, yes, 1975, and they were one of the many groups that did perform. There's many other groups, and supposedly there's a lot of local and international bands performing. One of the session during, I guess, 1975 stage, a band member of theirs, his name is Matty Healy, he went up stage, and then for some reason, he went on a tirade. He started ranting and going on a tirade against Malaysia's homophobic laws. Uh, he goes on about this rant for quite a while, talks about how um, there's no business, him flying, performing, and then being told who to not have sex with, the typical kind of faggoty stuff. And then he proceeds to kiss another band member. In this case, it was Ross McDonald. So Matty Healy was a dude, Ross McDonald was a dude. They kiss on stage to kind of essentially parade this, oh, you don't tell me who I get to kiss and not kiss type of stuff. After going on a tirade against Malaysian constitution. Obviously, this caused the Ministry of Communications and Digitals in Malaysia to cancel, essentially, not just 1975. They didn't just cancel their performance and ban them. They actually canceled the entirety of the Good Vibes Festival. Um, I'm not sure whether this was the decision by the ministry itself or even by the Good Vibes. Um, but again, according to the report, it says the action of Matty Healy is seen as a form of contravention to Malaysian law. So I assume this was a decision made by the Ministry of Communications and Digitals. They decided to essentially sack the whole event, not just 1975. They're not going to take the risk anymore. We're not going to have, if one of your band decides to go on a tirade against our law, then we're just not going to have any of you, which is a shame. Supposedly, a lot of local performers didn't get to perform, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm not here to talk about how the entire event should have been handled by the state or even by the organization themselves. I'm here instead to discuss about how this controversy relates to our understanding of blasphemy law, right? And so, for Christians, for us who wants to speak to these kind of issues, we must fix our understanding of blasphemy law. Now, before anything, let me anchor us on a biblical text and principle. Okay? I'm gonna borrow Leviticus 24:16 to 23, reading the KJV version, beginning verse 16. And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him, as well as the stranger, as he that is born in the land, when he blasphemeth the name of the Lord, shall be put to death. And he that killeth any man shall surely be put to death, and he that killeth any beast shall make it good, beast for beast. If any man cause a blemish for his neighbor, as he hath done, so shall it be done to him. Breach for breach, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. As he hath caused a blemish in a man, so shall it be done to him again. And he that killeth a beast, he shall restore it. And he that killeth a man, he shall be put to death. Ye shall have one manner of law, as well as for the stranger, as for one of your own country. For I am the Lord your God. And Moses spake to the children of Israel that they should bring forth him that cursed out of the camp, and stone him with stones. And the children of Israel did as the Lord commanded Moses. Now, we need to, first of all, fix our understanding of blasphemy. Because blasphemy is not, because this law in Leviticus 23, is not about killing people who use Jesus Christ, they say Jesus Christ profanely as a cuss word. The main principle of this text is that God's law is binding on all people, right? This includes the stranger in the land of Israel. That's what the law means when it says, "You shall have one manner of law, even for the stranger." Right? There is no country that has two laws: one for the immigrants, one for the civilians, right? They're all under the same law. And it kind of comes down here. So the strangers in the land are included under the law of Israel. He cannot blaspheme God, and when charged with death, say, "I don't believe in the God of Israel." Right? That's not a valid excuse. He doesn't get to do that. And so, likewise, the citizens don't get to blaspheme God without without consequence. They can't say, "Oh, but I'm a covenant member. I get to say whatever I want." So the law applies both ways, both for the citizen and even for the stranger, sojourner, immigrant, whatever you want to call it. Now, since God is the source of the law, right, of any law, any offense against God is an offense against all the laws in a society. And so, and this is where, again, we need to fix the idea. Blasphemy isn't simply words spoken against God, right? Blasphemy is the ancient sin. It is the first denial that God is the source of all law, right? And then, of course, followed by the affirmation that man shall become autonomous, meaning his own law, right? So he denies God, he denies that God is the source of all legitimate law, and then he says, "Well, I'm man, I'm gonna be the determiner of right and wrong, I'm gonna eat from the fruit of the knowledge of good and evil, determine good and evil for myself." And so, uh, this sets kind of the nature, hopefully, of blasphemy, right? I'm going to read an excellent transcript from Rashduni's Institute of Biblical Law. It's a pretty long one, but please bear with me. And I quote, Bush commented, "It is moreover to be remembered that blasphemy is not confined to the mere profane use of the name of titles of the Most High. Any kind of disparaging or contemptuous reflection thrown out against the power or grace of God comes into the same category in the estimation of the Scriptures. Thus, Rabshakeh is charged with blasphemy for asserting that the God of Israel hath no more power than the gods of the heathens. And thus the psalmist pleads, O God, how long shall the adversary reproach? Shall the many blaspheme thy name forever? Thus, moreover, Paul says of himself that he was before his conversion a blasphemer, because he had spoken against and opposed the grace of Christ. And doubtless it is for the same reason that James says of the rich men of his day, Do they not blaspheme that worthy name by which you are called? The incident of Rabshakeh's blasphemy is very interesting. This commander of the Assyrian armed forces ridiculed Hezekiah's trust in God's ability to deliver Judah. Rabshakeh found such a faith ridiculous and made fun of it in 2 Kings 18:19-25, even stating, as though he were himself a prophet, that God had sent him to destroy the land. For Rabshakeh, an historical power could not be touched by God. History has priority over eternity. Blasphemy is thus more than taking the name of the Lord in vain. It is the denial of the power and relevance of God and His law word. It is the contempt for His word as empty and impotent. It is the misuse of God's word to serve man's purpose, as though God is nothing and cannot see to avenge himself. Blasphemy treats God as a non-entity. Scott observed long ago, blasphemy against God, yea, contempt of Him, expressed in words or actions, is in its own nature not only more heinous than theft or robbery of any kind, but even than murder. And though it frequently escapes unpunished by man, yet it shall by no means escape the righteous vengeance of God. So, the quote goes on for a little bit more. More than a few scholars believe that the law of retribution was set aside by our Lord in Matthew 5:38. Such men also often feel that their more modern wisdom enables them to correct or supplement both Moses and Christ. And yet, no society can stand if it blasphemously denies the foundation of all justice. David asks, If the foundation be destroyed, what can the righteous do? Psalm 11:3. The Hebrew word for foundation is sheta, a basis, figuratively, a political or moral support, foundation, or purpose. One example of this kind of denial, right? This kind of uh, going against the very foundation of all law in the society, is John Calvin and Michael Servetus. right? It's usually a common thing that Calvin is maligned for his treatment of Servetus. Servetus was this anti-Trinitarian heretic. He was supposedly also an anarchist, right? He was an Anabaptist. Um, and people usually say that this is one of the blotch, one of the uh, dark patch of Calvin's history, where he sent Servetus to be executed by burning on a stake. Um, Now, that's not entirely true. Calvin actually didn't have any power to execute Servetus. It was actually Geneva, likely the Protestants there that wanted Servetus dead. Everyone wanted Servetus dead, to be honest. But uh, I'm saying this is one of the example. They knew that Servetus, in denying the Trinitarian God, in denying the Father, Son, and Spirit to be one God, three distinct person, he's not just denying particular Christian doctrine or Protestant or Catholic doctrine. He was denying uh, all of the laws, all of the entire judicial foundation of Geneva, right? And so they felt, uh, they saw at least, that execution was the only uh, good restitution, right? When you kill an ox, you have to return an ox. That was part of the law that we read just now. If a man causes a blemish, then he has to make it good, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. Well, guess what? The denial of the Trinity led them to believe that the only right restitution was for him to give his life. So hopefully, um, this gives us an idea, right? A Christian republic, if there is in the future such a thing, right? And there will be a Christian republic, a country that bases its laws and everything on God's word, God's revelation, God's laws, right? We don't legislate a law that goes against biblical law. If that kind of republic exists, then they will, and they should execute anarchists, right? Heretics included, because uh, assuming they don't repent from their blasphemies, because a society cannot stand, right? A society cannot survive while tolerating the people that hates it, right? They can't tolerate everything that stands to tear it down and survive as a society. That's not how it works. It's kind of the same thing with how America is in terms of terrorists, right? They say, "Oh, uh, we can't tolerate terrorists. They want to tear us down." And to be fair, they're not wrong. If there is a group, there is a people, there is an ideology that stands to tear down every single thing that built your nation, that is the foundation of your nation, would you not go to war against them? Now, I'm not saying America's war on terrorism has been all that good, but that's just an example, right? If it's played out ideally, then yeah, it should look like that. You should go to war and punish everything that stands against the foundations of your law, the foundations of your justice, the foundations of your uh, political body. Now, hopefully, this is helpful then to start looking at the Good Vibes Festival controversy, right? If the Malaysian constitution is true, that the federation is Islamic, then Matty Healy wasn't just attacking a bunch of words on paper, right? He wasn't just attacking a legislation or the constitution or anything like that. He is attacking the foundation of Malaysia's social order, right? He is going on a tirade. He was invited to this country and decides to say that this entire country, its foundation, and all that they stand for is illegitimate. And uh, although he didn't kill anyone or he caused any blemish to any man, he decided to go on a parade, right? Show this essentially gay. Essentially, he kissed his gay band member to end off his parade, his tirade against Malaysia's social order. Another biblical case law will be helpful to develop our idea further regarding the crime of blasphemy as an attack against a nation's law order. So, let me read Leviticus 24:10-16, beginning to read verse 10. And the son of an Israelitish woman, whose father was an Egyptian, went out among the children of Israel. And this son of the Israelitish woman and a man of Israel strove together in the camp. And the Israelitish woman's son blasphemed the name of the Lord and cursed. And they brought him unto Moses. And his mother's name was Shelomith, the daughter of Dibri, of the tribe of Dan. And they put him in a ward, that the mind of the Lord might be showed them. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Bring forth him that hath cursed without the camp, and let all that hurt him lay their hands upon his head, and let all the congregation stone him. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, Whosoever curseth his God shall bear his sin. And he that blasphemeth the name of the Lord, he shall surely be put to death, and all the congregation shall certainly stone him, as well as the stranger, as he that is born in the land, when he blasphemeth the name of the Lord, shall be put to death. So, this is kind of a famous text among the village atheists, right? They think that this text is all about killing anyone who commits a verbal attack against Yahweh. Oh, look at this guy. He's half Israelite, half Egyptian. He's likely half Egyptian. I don't know the other part. Likely Israelite. We don't know the identity of the father. But yes, this half Egyptian, likely sojourner, blasphemed the name of the Lord, and they decided that he should get the death penalty. And so they think, oh, everyone who says, "Oh my God" or "Jesus Christ" as a cuss word should be committed to the death penalty. Um, but here are some of the points, right? They pose. Uh, One of the things that the atheists would say is that society can't have freedom of speech while having blasphemy laws, right? Oh, how can we have freedom of speech if all the time we can't even say "Oh my God" without getting our heads cut off? This is essentially uh, inhibiting speech. This is essentially no different than what the left wants to do, what the liberals want to do in policing language. But as we have learned before, hopefully, as everyone caught it, blasphemy is not just speech against God, right? I'll have you guys know that just like any biblical law, this is a case law, right? Deuteronomy 22:28 already stated law against blasphemy, and yet in Exodus 22:28 there was no penalty attached to it. And likely the reason is because the penalty is determined by the situation and case. And so, uh, just as the text we read previously, uh, it says that if a man cause a blemish, then he shall make it good, eye for eye, tooth for tooth. If a man kills a beast, then he shall make it good, another beast. And if he kills a man, then uh, he should give his life, essentially, because he took a life. And so, uh, the point is, right, the law is not to be applied word to word, because it is likely that this man did something else. This man did something else besides the blasphemy that caused the people to decide, hey, he is worthy of death. There was likely an altercation that did lead to death while having him curse the Lord, right? And so I hope that kind of sheds light on the idea of this case law. So case laws are not something like statutory law. It's not like constitutional law where you apply it word by word. You are trying to get the principles out of it, right? And the principle is you have to make full restitution. If you kill a beast, you return a beast. If you make a man lame, then you should also essentially give parts of your body to be lamed. Um, and if you take a life, you should give a life. And so it's very likely the reason that this man is put to death is not just because he was swearing or saying, "Oh my God." Um, he was likely in an altercation that led to another man's life. Now, according to the case law, let's go back and do a little bit of analysis. The man was half Egyptian, right? This kind of solves the issue. The law does apply to him. He was likely a sojourner, or even um, he was a member of Israel, but he was not permitted into covenant life. He was not permitted into citizenship, membership, whatever. So he would be, by the third generation, his descendants would have been eligible for entry into covenant life. Now, some insights here. According to rabbinic scholars, the father of this man was the Egyptian slain by Moses, right? The taskmaster under whom the husband of Shelomith worked. Moses found this man smiting another man whom he had injured and put to shame. And supposedly they entered an altercation, supposedly because he wanted to set his abode, his house, in the camp of the Danites in Numbers 2, verse 2, right? So he's not happy with the corner that was designated for the foreigners. So we're not given any specific data about the nature of the blasphemy, right? Like what did he actually do to be accused of blasphemy? And it's likely because it wasn't important, right? It was clearly, obviously, a flagrant offense, right? And one that struck at the authority and majesty of the covenant Lord. And in here, in this particular text, the word blasphemy in the Hebrew is nakab, to curse, revile, puncture, or pierce, right? It means to seek to destroy. It's warfare against God and His covenant law. This tells us something about this man's offense, right? This incident is set in the midst of laws. As we notice, this is in the midst of the giving of laws, and it tells us that even as the law was being given, this man was expressing his contempt for God and His law. So, and this is the part where we kind of have trouble, right? Modern man sees blasphemy as an inhibition of freedom. Why? Because he saw himself, right? Modern man sees himself instead of God as the ultimate source of law and jurisdiction. So this case law, this particular case law in Leviticus and many others like it, is not about killing someone because they said God's name in vain or they said God's name as a curse word. This law shows us the nature and the final extent of blasphemy, right? It it is the denial of God's jurisdiction and providential care in and out of covenant life. So, what am I saying? I'm definitely not saying that all blasphemy leads to an altercation, that leads to the taking of life or even anarchy, right? Guess what? Some people, even Christians, commit blasphemy all the time, and yet most of them are likely not anarchists and not murderers. This case law is meant to show that at the heart of it, blasphemy is always an attack on God. Uh, it could lead to an attack on their neighbor because God did say, uh, "Love yourself and your neighbor. Love your neighbor such as yourself." And so, an attack against that law would be to attack your neighbor. And although that's not always the case, so you might be asking, so how does this work then in 20th century? Is it that anyone who breaks God's law or anyone who doesn't believe in God's law should be executed with the death penalty? That's even worse now that we trace the full extent of blasphemy, right? But I would posit to you right now as a hypothesis that blasphemy law is inevitable, right? Blasphemy law is, I would say, as we always do, an inescapable concept. It is not whether, but which. It's not whether we'll have blasphemy law. It is who, who is the God, which is God, and will he be blasphemed? And that's because society will always have a God. Society will always have a lawgiver, right? If you want to have a society and it has to be ordered, it's not anarchy 247, then there has to be a law. And for there to be a law, there is a lawgiver. And what I'm proposing is the fact that whoever is the lawmaker, whoever is the lawgiver in the society, is the God in that society. And so any revolt against the God or lawmaker in the society is blasphemy, right? That is the full nature and extent of blasphemy. It is the denial, it is a revolt against the God in the society or the lawmaker in the society. It's the same thing. And so let's think about this all over again. With those principles in mind, we have to think, for example, let's take the Western world. Let's take the country like America, for example. Who is their God? Well, people often say, oh, America was a Christian nation. Well, maybe it was, but look at it now. Who is clearly God in America? And it's very likely uh, the left, the liberals, the gays, the LGBTQ, the homosexuals, right? Why would I say that? Because they're the ones pushing their law. They're the ones legislating things. They're legislating that people should police their language. They're legislating that there should be uh, uh, wealth distribution. They're positing that there has to be universal health care. They're positing that, yes, you should have gender affirming language. You should allow kids to have transsexual surgery before they're even 5, right? They are pushing the law. They are determining the direction of the law in their country, in their society. And so, of course, they should be, and rightly so, they are the God in that society. Now, we should think about that ourselves. For Malaysia, who is God, right? We can always say, oh, it's Allah, oh, it's Jesus Christ, or whatever. But who is truly God in Malaysia? Who is the one who's actually making laws? Who is the one you can commit blasphemy against? Right? I remember not too long ago, someone was charged with essentially a smear campaign. Someone made a very bad art caricature of one of the previous prime minister, and he was charged and he went to prison. And so things like that, we see things like that, and then we say, "Oh, Malaysia doesn't have blasphemy law." Yes, we do. We do. The fact that you cannot make bad art against a human because you saw that their actions or their morals as reprehensible and you want to make a caricature out of it, you can't do that. Well, that's blasphemy law. That is essentially the country saying, hey, we're protecting this man. This man should not have his honor smeared, regardless of the morals and decisions of the man. And so, therefore, we'll punish anyone who commits blasphemy against this man. And so, that's just one small example. uh, we should think about it in ourselves, right? Who is God for our individual self? You might say, oh, as a Christian, Jesus is God, right? Yahweh is my God. Holy Spirit is God. Well, uh, here's the thing, right? The Pharisees fooled themselves into thinking that Yahweh is their God. But remember, they killed Jesus. They killed Jesus, the Son of God, under what? Under a blasphemy charge, right? Jesus quotes Daniel 7. He says he's the one, he's going to come in the clouds, he's going to come to the Ancient of Days, he's going to come to the Father, and he's going to inherit the nations. And then the high priest tore his robe. He tore his robe and then says, why do we need more witness? Right? Have you not heard the blasphemy? Have you not heard this man's blasphemy? And so there are situations, there are cases where we clearly think, oh, this is the God. This is the God of our hearts. This is the God of our nation. This is the God of the society. This is the God of the world around us. And yet, we act completely against it, right? There is something that is worth more than God, His honor, His jurisdiction, His authority in lawmaking, right? And so that kind of leads to our first problem. Ever since Jesus Christ, and it's very clear, ever since the birth of Jesus Christ, the state has been the greatest blasphemer, right? Jesus was born, Herod tries to kill him, the Pharisees and the Sadducees try to get him to be killed. He says things against the Pharisees, the political leaders, the religious and the state leaders. He makes claims against Rome, against Caesar, uh, and obviously they all try to murder him. And so they do that. Why? Because they don't want this man, this Jesus of Nazareth, to be the ultimate law, to be the ultimate king of all things, as he claims to be. They want to keep their claim of authority. They want to remain to be king. They want to remain to be the lawmaker for man and society. And so, uh, in the case of a religious state, right, they refuse to legislate biblical laws. They could claim to be religious. They could claim that they are Christian or they're Islam or whatever, and yet they don't legislate laws according to their holy texts, according to the Bible or according to the Quran. A secular state can think that there's no God. They don't believe there is a God, and so they believe that they can govern man from cradle to grave. They think that they can make laws for other men, even though supposedly they're all equal. They're all highly evolved bacteria, and yet they want to say they can make laws while the other ones should simply obey. Now, uh, here's the thing, right? If one can commit treason against their nation, and the penalty would be bigger than treason against God, then surely that nation, that political body, is regarded as higher than God, right? Whoever you can commit blasphemy against, that is the God of that system. And so, to be very real, to make a very real comment here, uh, despite disregarding my safety or my immigration status, who's the true God in Malaysia? It's very likely people like the YDPA and the prime ministers, because you cannot commit essentially blasphemy against the YDPA and maybe sometimes against the Prime Minister, but I don't think that's the case anymore. But yeah, imagine if you make a bad art caricature of the current YDPA, you will likely get a death sentence. That means the YDPA is the god of the system, right? He is the one you can commit blasphemy against. He's the one whose honor you can smear and it will be worth your life. And now take it to the other example. What about 1975? What about Matty Healy and the LGBTQ community, right? Uh, who is the god for their community? Who is the god for those kind of people? And the answer is likely their group themselves or their own sexuality, right? Matthew Healy says things like, "You can't tell me who I can sleep with. You can't tell me who I fantasize of masturbating. You can't tell me who I uh, have sex and kiss with, and so on and so forth. Even if it's another dude and I'm a guy, right? They're saying that their sexuality should be the determiner of laws, and they will not obey to Malaysian law in doing so. So this whole controversy makes more sense now because it's about a clash. It's a clash between their god and Malaysia's god, right? Malaysia has a god, it has a law system, and it says, well, we're not pro-gay. We're gonna have anti-sodomy laws. And Matt Healy says, well, I'm pro-sodomy because this is my god. My sexuality is my god, and if my sexuality says we can be faggots, we can be gay, we can sleep with whoever we want, and we can probably transgender kids, then that's gonna be the case. We don't want to listen to laws that says otherwise because they have their own god and their own law system. And so, hopefully, that gives you a clean context and a kind of clean insight to the whole event. Why would this even happen in the first place? Why does Matty Healy feel the need to went on a tirade against Malaysia's law? Why can't he just perform and then go away and take the money and shut up? Right? He can't because it's his God. He has to defend his God, which is his sexuality. It deserves the ultimate honor. And then what about Malaysia? Why can't Malaysia just be chill about it? Oh, it's just one dude. He's gonna be quiet about it. He's just gonna play and then leave. He's not gonna make any political social impact. And yet Malaysia decides to essentially ban, essentially usher out the whole Good Vibe Festival, right? Because Malaysia's core foundation, their God and their law system, is being under attack. It is under attack by Matty Healy, by their claims, their gods, and their law system, their system of morality. And so, now that you think about it, the reaction of both parties are actually reasonable here. At least it is logical. Matty Healy wants to defend his God, the honor of his law system, his moral system, and Malaysia wants to defend theirs. Right? They want to defend their morality, their law system, their God, and they do so by making sure that not even Matty Healy or anyone in the Good Vibes Festival can say anything against their law system ever again. Hopefully, at least not during the event. And so, uh, again, if you really think that it's still such an absurd controversy that Matty Healy could just shut up and the Malaysian government could just let it go and be quiet, then you are missing the point. Try to apply this in yourself, in the society around you, right? There must be application for the self here. Who do we uphold? Us in our personal individual self. Who do we uphold to have the highest honor, right? When someone does a smear campaign on your character, on your image, do you rush to defend it, right? Do you rush to defend it faster than if someone decides to smear God, if someone decides to blaspheme God, right? Who do you rush in defense of, yourself or God? For a lot of Chinese people, right, who is their God? Who do they uphold to be of highest honor? Is it their Chinese ancestry? Is it their grandparents, great great grandparents? Is it their bloodline? Is it their last name? Is it their surname? Whatever it might be, right? Could it be that those things, like their Chinese ancestry, holds the highest honor? They're willing to forego their Christian principles and Christian morals as long as they can keep their parents or grandparents happy, right? By doing all these Chinese traditions, even though it might go against Christian principles, right? Uh, what is the highest honor that you usually brag about? when you go into social situations? Is it your scholarship? Is it your achievement? Or do you always give honor to God? Do you always identify yourself first and foremost as a Christian? Or maybe you have a kind of idealism, a kind of ideology, or even a hero that you uphold above anything, right? You believe in Stoicism, you believe in Freudianism, a bunch of other things, a bunch of ideologies, and maybe a bunch of heroes and thinkers who could likely be your idol, right? Do you rush in their defense when they are simply men who are indefensible most of the time? Um, and then we also think about how we make our decisions, right? How do we react to uh, certain, of course, breach, certain disrespect towards the things that we hold dear? Maybe someone disrespects your parents, maybe someone disrespects you, someone disrespects your sibling, or maybe even disrespect your work, disrespect your friends, and so on and so forth, right? What do you do? Do you take it in? Do you rush to their defense? Do you uh, essentially go on a tirade against the oppressor, and so on and so forth? That these kind of things will show you who is God in both your personal private life and also in society. Once you notice what is it that society immediately defends, right? Then you will know that is the God of that society. It could be different things. It could be your rights, likely. Oh, I have the right to free speech, freedom of speech, or free education, or whatnot. No, you don't. But you get the point. Then you likely defend it to the death, right? Oh, I want to say whatever I want, whenever I want, however way I want it. Then guess what? Maybe the right of your speech, the freedom of your speech, is the God for you, right? It deserves more respect, more honor than God Himself, because God did say that you should control your tongue. There should be a policing of language, not by the state, obviously, but by yourself. And yet, if you yourself don't want to do that, then maybe your tongue, your language, is the God for you. Could it be your country, your tradition, your church, even, right? Do you rush in defense of your country, of your tradition, of your church when they do things rather indefensible, right? We could do things like that. We could essentially idolize the community we've built. We could idolize the country that we were born in, the tradition that we've always observed and respected. And it's not always wrong. Just like I said, it's not always wrong. For example, for a man to honor his Chinese ancestry, right? You should respect mother and father, but only because mothers and fathers are the covenant representative of God, right? You don't respect mothers and fathers because they have inherent authority in themselves. They have derivative authority from God, and that's why you would respect them. The same goes here. As long as your church, your country, your tradition does respect God, does honor God, and is acting as a lawful representative towards God, then maybe you should defend them. Maybe you should um, defend your country, your church, your tradition if it upholds God as the ultimate lawmaker and as the ultimate honor. And yet, when it does not, right? When your church does something that does not honor God, your tradition does something that does not honor God, and your country does things that do not honor God, why should you, as a Christian, ever rush to its defense? The only reason would likely be because you still either do not understand blasphemy law or you still have a part of them as your God, right? Perhaps your country still holds a position in your heart as the ultimate sovereign jurisdiction and law. And that shouldn't be the case, right? We love our nation, we love the place that we live in, we love our parents. We should love all these things. But remember, love without moderation, love without law is uh, is nothing. It's essentially fluff, right? And so we should not fall into these trappings of, oh, I'm going to defend my country. I'm going to be patriotic. I'm going to defend my family, my traditions, because it's everything that I am. It's not. It's not everything that you are. God is. Jesus Christ has bought you. He is everything that you are. And so the only time you should expend all your resources and all your energy defending something is God Himself. And that could work through other things. But only when it is pointed towards God will it be faithful in defending other things like your country, like your tradition, like your church. And so, hopefully, that's been helpful. It's kind of a more messy video. I'm sorry. My notes are not that great. As you can notice, I'm also reading sometimes. But yeah, there's a lot of other things I want to tackle, obviously. I wanted to talk about censorship, but I'll probably save it for another video. This is already a pretty long one. I got future video ideas. I'm back in Indonesia, and turns out we're gonna have an election soon, and one of the party decides to say, "Oh, if we get elected, then we're gonna have BPGS to be free," which is, if you don't know what BPGS is, it's kind of similar to universal healthcare programs, kind of like a universal health grant. Um, and obviously, that's not biblical. And yet, one of my very own friends, who is a Christian, follows that political party. And so, I wish to also engage in those kind of things. There's probably other topics I want to talk about. Uh, some big topics recently are things like aliens that the American government's been talking about. Oh, they got alien witnesses, they got alien this, alien that, which probably will also go into topics of metaphysics and whatnot. So it's gonna be fun talking about those things. I would love some feedback. I know that I don't have that many of an audience, but if you feel like you think that I can tackle a particular topic, or you're interested to hear what I have to say about a particular thing, then you can always write to me at my the Gmail that I use for this podcast, or you can straight write it down in the comment section if you're on YouTube. But yeah, hopefully I can keep up the audio quality, keep up the video quality, improve it one day, and editing quality. Until then, I'll see you guys, because this has been Kingdom Cast signing off.